Okay, number 10, Rafe says that keeping Rand as more of a background character in season 1 fits the character as someone who doesn't want to stand out and is reluctant to take the mantle of being the dragon. He doesn't want any part of it and has been set up for season 2 to wrangle with the conflict. See, this is another one his part of his argument is correct and another part of his argument is incorrect, because Rand is not a background character in the Eye of the World. Rand is still like the main character in Eye of the World, and he doesn't want it. It's like in Game of Thrones. Jon Snow, I don't want it. Jon Snow doesn't fade into the background. The problem is that Rand fades so much in the background in season 1 that you kind of forget he's there. I mean, that's sort of the problem. His argument about him not wanting to be the dragon and all of this stuff, I'm a farmer. He is struggling with that. I don't think they did a good enough job of doing it, because this is one of the lines you walk is you went with the who is the dragon, which was cool. I did like that sort of teasing who the dragon was, but you didn't do it enough with Rand to be a potential person as to who the dragon is. And I get why they did it, because then it's like, oh, it's a surprise. It's the person you least think it is. Right. But
Right.
you needed just a little bit more. I mean, Rand does break down the door, right?
Yeah.
But that's like,
Looks at Dragon Mount.
That's before we see, looks at Dragon Mount.
Yeah.
That's before we see Nynaeve basically go Super Saiyan and spirit bomb everything, and then Matt get like crazy sick with the dagger.
Yeah.
So you kind of forget about it, and you also could, it happens kind of fast. I mean, it's pretty obvious because we're looking for it, but I could see how a non-book reader would kind of forget about that, because there's all this up, like, the dark friend is chasing you. It's our first dark friend. So yeah, I disagree with the idea that he's a background character.
Yeah, and I wonder if this is someone's summary of the article, because
Exactly.
I wonder if
You're
he
right.
said that exactly, because that's definitely. But that he wants to keep him as more of a background character,
Right.
yeah. There is so much sort of screen time and dialogue and things that you have, because it did feel like Rand didn't speak for a long time. Sort of like,
Right.
wow. Once you heard him, it really stood out, because you're like, oh, that's Rand speaking, and like you kind of knew it. Now, one thing this actually does. Point 10 here makes me think about Egwene a little bit, because you just brought up something interesting in that how they, how Rand showed his power, Matt was sick, Nynaeve did her thing, and Egwene, I thought it's really a subtle thing. Like, we didn't show or do enough with Egwene. It didn't seem like it was enough, but I guess it's more what they were going for was the attention given to her by Moraine, because that still kind of comes through, but it doesn't.
She does use the power, but the problem with it is that in terms of what their goal was, which was sort of set up everybody as a potential candidate for the dragon. The problem with it was you saw Nynaeve use the power, and it was like this big, massive. We actually saw Nynaeve use the power twice, like mega used the power. Once once with Logan, and then once in the ways, where Egwene shoots this tiny little fireball at Perrin, and then all of these wolves are attacking the White Cloaks, and so you sort of. Her little fireball, right? I mean, it's like a little ember, right? Is lost in this scene where all of these wolves are coming out of nowhere, killing all the White Cloaks. So, like, Egwene as a potential candidate to me, it never felt like it, except for the fact that they just kept saying she was.
Right, and they kept giving her the attention, yeah, so that's because I guess it's kinda like, well, if they're all just throwing around heavy power, so I don't know, it is interesting, and they had to balance it. They had to figure out how they're going to tease each one of them as the dragon and not make them all the same, not make them all just use the power, because Matt gets sick, and that's really an interesting thing.
I think it just would have been better. I think it would have been better because the whole deal was is that Moraine keeps being reluctant to say it's Nynaeve, because if it comes of her age, and it comes across though as she doesn't like her, which is kind of like book accurate, right? Is that they just don't like each other. That's just part of the way the book is written too, is it feels like as a reader they don't like each other, but she really does kind of like her. I almost just feel like I wouldn't have had Egwene as a candidate, and then I mean, that's the other thing too, is I almost feel like I would have just kept it honestly the way it is, where it's the boys, but
Mhm.
then have Nynaeve do her thing, and it's like something so crazy. Like, I wouldn't have started with the idea that it could have been a woman. I think I would have started with it's supposed to be a boy, and then you have Nynaeve use her power, and then it's because they go into the idea that we don't know.
Mhm.
So, and she questions, was I wrong? So if you have Nynaeve use her power like that, then she's like, are we even right about this? Then
Mhm.
I think it sets it up more. Well, maybe Egwene could be it too, rather than starting with Egwene and like Nynaeve-ish, right? Potentially being candidates. You still could
Yeah.
have done it all, but if you had just focused it on the boys, we would have been looking at Rand, Perrin, and Matt for like a book for a few more episodes, and then you have Nynaeve do her thing, and then it opens the whole box again of like, are we even right? When she questions it with Suan.
Yeah. No, that's cool. That makes sense. I will say, at least, you know, as we're talking about this, I've thought it is interesting that they did change the idea that the dragon could be a woman,
Right.
because I guess when you think about the wheel turning over and over and over, and that the chosen one, air quote.
I'm sure it's possible at some point.
Right,
Well, I
yeah,
don't know.
yeah.
Yeah.
But just the idea that the prophecies would say that the chosen one is always male. I get where that they, as a
Right.
studio, they came out and said, "Yeah, we gotta make some adjustments." But I like your idea too, that we
Right.
could, you know, you
Well, I
could
mean,
switch around when that comes up.
I would say in theory, like just in a book theory, right? You know, you're talking about the wheel turns thousands and thousands and thousands of times. It's kind of like a multiverse that in theory it could have been that the women, right, you know, the other way around, right? Where what if the female half had gotten tainted and it was the
Mhm,
males who said we're going to shut them off? Like
mhm.
it could have happened the other way around, and then I think the dragon potentially could have been a female. I think it's
Right.
in theory like it's possible. I can see that.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah. Just interesting. Yep.
Number 11, Rafe says folks misread the Egwene Nynaeve scene and they will be keeping the death cannot be healed metaphysics in the show, and apologies to the fans for it not being clear. Well, I was about to say, yeah, I here's the thing. I get that you're apologizing, but saying that folks misread